Alright guys, welcome back again. In our previous video, we built our very first program, which is a console application. That is a program that when executed prints a message to our console. And I also made you guys comfortable with the Visual Studio integrated development environment. I told you guys about the Solution Explorer that you could drag and you could bring it out. I wanted you guys to get comfortable with the solution, with the Microsoft Visual Studio Community Edition integrated development environment. I also let you guys know that you could use Ctrl S to save your code at any point in time that you are working, and program.cs, it's just a C# file that lives inside of your project, and you can see that from the Solution Explorer. All right, so in this video I would want to show you guys the standards. It's a bit of standards that you should know, because from time to time you would see that. And in order to proceed, I'd want you to click on your project from your Solution Explorer. So click on your project name, my very first project, and change the settings of implicit usings. Change it from enable to disable. So I'm going to change this to disable. So I'm going to disable implicit usings. All right. Now close that out and head back to your program.cs file and clear up everything inside of it. All right. Now, the standard I would want you guys to know is that every bunch of code, right, must live inside of a method, and every method must live inside of a class, and every class must live inside of a namespace. All right, so let's go ahead and replicate the console application using this same standard. All right, so we start by creating out a namespace. So you can create a namespace by using the keyword namespace. You start by creating out a namespace, and then you want to give your namespace a name. So I'm going to call it my first project, and you open curly braces. Now you have created your namespace. Now the Microsoft Visual Studio IDE automatically paints all keywords in blue. So you can see the keyword namespace is in blue. Now, the next thing is that inside of your namespace, you would want to create your class. So go ahead and create your class. Now, I would advise us, because we are working out of the program.cs file, you want to create a class called program. So you create a class by using the class keyword class with the name of the class, which I'm going to call program. And I open parentheses, I open curly braces. Now, inside of our program class, we're going to have our main method. Now, the main method is a standard. In your program.cs file, there should always be a main method, because that is where your entire project starts running codes from. So we're going to have our main method. So to do that, write the keyword static. You don't need to worry yourself about what static means for now, since you guys are just beginners, but just go ahead and write this static void main. The most important thing I want you to know is that the name of the method is called main, and I'm going to have parentheses, and you open curly braces. So do the same thing I have just done. Now, this is the standard for this would be the standard whenever you would want to code. So the first thing you have to know is that your bunch of code would always live inside of a method, and that method would always live inside of a class, and that class would always live inside of a namespace. So I want you to think of this. I want you to think of your namespace as a folder and your class as a folder. Think of containers, think of containerization. So we have a method called main, and the main method lives inside of a class called program, and the program class lives inside of a namespace called my first project. Now, you should know that a namespace can contain more than 2 classes, right? And a class can contain more than 1 method. I have to take that again. A namespace can contain more than 1 class. So it's possible that we could have another class here, and we could call that class Jack. And we could have as many classes as possible. All right, so we can have a third class, and we can call that class number 3. So we could have as many classes as possible in a single namespace. And the same thing goes for methods. We could have more than 1 method in a single class. So for example, in program class, we could have another method called power. Right. So for now, I'm going to keep it simple. The standard of the program.cs file is that there's always going to be a namespace, and in that namespace, the namespace is always going to live inside. The namespace is always going to contain a class, and the class is always going to contain a method called main, and in that method, we're going to write a bunch of code, right? So for the program.cs file, the standard is that it's always going to have a method called main, and main is the entry method of our console application. So that's where our program will start to execute our codes from. Now, so what is the code we would want to execute here? We would want to print out a message that says, "Hello world, my name is David." So let's say we are beginners. Obviously, we don't know how to print out a message. So in this video, I would want to take the opportunity to show you how you could use Google and how you could use the internet as your resource to find solutions to your coding problems. So I want to print out a message that says, "Hello world," So, and I don't know, let's assume that I am not aware that it is console.writeline. So, all right. So I would go to Google. So I'm going to go to Google right now, google.com, and I will say, how do I print a message to my console C#? So once you guys hit this, and I want you guys to focus on learn.microsoft.com. It is Microsoft's official, kind of like documentation to all this bunch of C# code, C# stuff. So go ahead and hit the link from learn.microsoft.com that says console.writeline. And you would see that console.writeLine method, it says this is console.write. Okay, cool. So it says console.write method. You would see there is another information here that says writeLine. So go ahead and hit writeLine. It says console.writeLine method. Now definition, it says the method comes from the namespace called system, right? You don't need to worry about the assembly. So I want you to know that the console.writeLine method comes from the namespace called system. And this is what the method does. It writes a specified data followed by a current line terminator to the standard output stream. What it's trying to say here is that it writes a specified data to our console, and that's what we want. So we want to use the console.writeLine method. But then the documentation tells us that the method lives inside of the namespace system. So we need to tell our code to look into the namespace system in order to bring the console.writeLine method. So to do this, we head over to our code, and right before our my first project namespace, we have to use the using keyword, using, and then we'll say using system. So what we're trying to do here is say go into system, because we are going to use a method and a class that comes out of system. So now we have brought in the system namespace into our project. So you use the using keyword when you want to import abilities from every other namespace or namespaces that exist on your system or your machine. And these namespaces are like standards, so system is a standard namespace that comes with C#. So when you install .NET and all the dependencies into your computer system is a standard namespace that comes with it. All right, so let's head back to Google again, and it says use console.writeLine. The method is console.writeLine. So if you go back to your code, now between the main method, I told you that we're going to write in our code here. So we're going to start writing console. Now the reason we can see console right now here is because we have brought in the namespace system here. So console is actually a class that lives inside of the system namespace, and we want to use the system namespace in our my first project namespace, and that is why we have imported it with the using keyword. All right, so I access the console class, and inside of the console class, the method I want to access is the writeLine method. So I'm going to say console.writeLine. And now, whenever you call a method in C#, you just have to put your parentheses. And you can see that the method, so we're going to head back to Google again to read more descriptions about the method. We can see that the method takes in a string. If you look here, you see writeLine, you see parentheses, it takes in a string or an object or whatever. So I just wanted to focus on it. Just takes in something inside of the bracket, and look at it. These are the different overloads that you could have for the method. So let's see the first use case of the method. So I want you to see these things as use cases. So the first use case is that you call the method writeLine, and you can pass a string inside of the method that's inside of the parentheses. And I want you to see later on in the video, you're going to understand what a string is. So a string is just a data type, but just know that you can pass something inside of the method. All right. So you can put something between the parentheses. So let's head back to our code. So what do we want to put between the parentheses? We want to put hello world. This is so hello world. I am David. And like I said, almost every line of code in C# ends with a semicolon. I think about 70% of lines of code. Not every time, but I think about 70%. So we're going to have our semicolon. And we hit Ctrl S to save. And we are done. We have just written our very first Hello World program again. So let's go ahead. Sorry, I'm going to do a little correction here on my sentence, on what I'm going to print. So we are done. So let's go ahead and run this program. So hit the run button, and it should do the same thing. Print out a message that says, hello world, I am David. Okay. Now, this is the standard of every, standard principle, while coding. You're always going to have a namespace. The namespace is going to live inside of the namespace is going to contain a class, and the class is going to contain method, and the method is going to have your bunch of codes. Let's go ahead and see let's see if this is true for the WriteLine method. All right, so hover your mouse on the WriteLine method and go over to the little description that is here, and you can see that you can click on the WriteLine here. So I want you to double tap on the WriteLine, or you're more than welcome to hover your mouse on the WriteLine, right click on it, and I want you to go to implementation. So go to implementation, and it takes you to a bunch of code somewhere. You see, this code lives somewhere inside of a computer, but you never know. So you can see that the code actually houses a WriteLine method, but that's not what I want to show you right now. I don't want you to be confused, so I want you to just scroll up, go up to this console.cs file that was just opened up here. So go up, and then you would notice that it follows the same standard. There is a namespace called system, and that's why we had to import system in our program, because we wanted to use this particular file. So we had to import system, and inside of that namespace we have a class called console, and inside of that class console we have our method somewhere here called, I'm going to do a find, Control F, and I do WriteLine. WriteLine, and I click search, and we have a method called WriteLine. So that's the standard for every program file, for every code or coding file. It's always going to contain a namespace. Namespace is going to contain a class, and the class is always going to contain methods. And you could import other namespaces with the using keyword. Let's go back again to our console.WriteLine file, right click and go to implementation and go back up again. You would notice that this particular namespace or namespace system is importing several namespaces from system.diagnostic, system.diagnostic.code.analysis, system.io, system.runtime.compiler services. So these are namespaces that this particular system namespace imported to implement all the bunch of codes you see here. right? But you don't have to worry yourself about it. All you have to know is the standard. There's always going to be a namespace, and that namespace is going to contain a class, and that class is going to contain a method, and that method is going to contain a bunch of code. So go ahead and close the console.cs file. Remember, this console.cs file is a default stuff. I mean, it comes with the .NET, So I want you guys to picture this, and you kind of see how all this stuff are being connected, right? So we could use the console.writeLine here simply by calling that CS file, console.cs file, that lives somewhere inside of our computer, which we don't know of, and we don't care, as long as we can call it using the system by calling the namespace, the system namespace, and we could write a bunch of code here, console.writeLine, and print out whatever we wanted. Okay, now this is your program.cs file. Now, what C# has done, or what Microsoft has done in the newer version, is that they have taken the work this is specifically for the program.cs file. So this functionality I'm about to explain it's only applicable to the program.cs file. So what Microsoft has done with the program.cs file is that they have said that, oh, you don't need to worry, since we already know that this is a standard, you don't need to worry about writing this bunch of codes in your program.cs file. We are always aware that your coding file would always need a program.cs file, because that is where your code starts to run from by default. So you don't have to write all this bunch of codes. We would help you. We would build in something inside of Visual Studio that would help you write that code by default, and all you have to do now is just focus on your main code, which is any other thing you would want to write. So they have done something that that gives us the rest of mind, and we don't have to worry about all this code. So you can go ahead and delete this, right? You delete this, and your code should work this way. Now, the reason why our code is having an error here, it says that it doesn't know where console is coming out from, because it says the name console does not exist in the current context. Is because we haven't enabled that functionality. To enable that functionality now, all you have to do is, on your Solution Explorer, go back to your Solution Explorer and click on My Very First Project, and get back to implicit usings, and then enable that functionality. Now, once you do that, the compiler will know that, oh yeah, I know what you want to do. You want to write all those bunch of standard codes in your program.cs, and I will do it for you. The compiler, the Microsoft Visual Studio automatically does that for you. And we can see that our code works. So just in case you're looking at much older videos from 2007, you might be seeing that bunch of code in your program.cs. Don't be worried. Just know that it's still basically the same thing. You could choose to write it. You can choose not to write it, because Microsoft Visual Studio, the .NET 8.0 right now, does it behind the scenes for you. Thank you very much for watching this video to this very moment. You can still go ahead and run your program, and you would see that it works fine. So see you guys in the next video, where we start getting handy with our development. Thank you.